Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our How to Get the Perfect S/4HANA Licensing Deal webinar. We're very excited to learn from two of the industry's leading experts, Jan Hackenberger and Moshe Panzer. Before we get started, I'd like to make just a few quick announcements. This webinar is being recorded. That recording will be available following the webinar. If you have any questions, please use the chat or Q&A feature in the panel down at the bottom of your screen. If we don't answer your questions immediately, we will address them in the Q&A section of the webinar at the end. We have an upcoming VMware webinar next month. Look for the link to register for that in an email that we'll send after this. And lastly, I just wanted to remind you that Anglepoint offers trainings. Everything from mainframe to SAM certifications and publisher specific. So to see those, please visit training.anglepoint.com. That's all that we have for announcements. So without further ado, I'll send it to Jan.
Hello. Thank you very much for the introduction, Pete and Braden. Together with me is Moshe Panzer from Expandion. We'll hear from Moshe also in a second. I would like to keep that introduction very short since we want to get to the core of today's topic, which is how to get the perfect S/4HANA licensing deal. Well-defined perfect. To my understanding, a good license agreement that you get with a software publisher really reflects your requirements and comes at a reasonable price. Everyone knows that SAP is well known for having individual pricing agreements with customers and having a good preparation for any upcoming negotiation will help you to get to the price that you're looking for, to the discounts that you need in order to have a licensing that supports your business. And how to get there, we will go through that in the presentation. And as Braden already said, just ask the questions that you have while we do the presentation. And if we can't answer all of them, there will be time after the webinar where we will definitely get back to you. So just real short introduction. I am the head of SAP related services, primarily looking at SAP licensing support for customers at Anglepoint. So I have this role on a global level. I'm located in Germany. My team is located across the globe. I've been with Anglepoint now for almost a year. Before that, one of my previously employers was KPMG. Also was working as a managing director for a smaller consulting firm in Germany. After that, I've been in that particular field around SAP licensing for now almost 10 years, looking at that issue around SAP license optimization. I have been there from the first time on when it was all about indirect access, and now we're looking into S/4HANA. So quite some changes over the last years. So that's all about me. I would like to hand over to Moshe for an introduction.
Hi, Jan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Moshe.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So for everyone, my name is Moshe Panzer. I'm the CEO of Expandion. I have 24 years of experience in SAP since, if anybody knows, the SAP 3.1. Back all days, and I've been all my life in technical background, meaning starting as an IBEF programmer, and then a team leader, and then software architect, and then a project manager. And the last 12 years, I'm the CEO of Expandion, and we will speak about it later. And definitely, I have knowledge in SAP security, user behavior, and SAP licensing. So this is my background.
Thank you, Moshe. I have to explain why we're actually doing this webinar together. Anglepoint and Expandion work very closely in a partnership for most of the projects where we are asked by customers to help them to get an understanding of what SAP licenses are being used, how SAP is being used, what licenses would be required based on that. Everything around also identification and optimization of of user role authorizations down to being prepared for S4HANA. That's where we rely on Moshe's solution that we will see also in some screenshots presented throughout the webinar. So just a couple of words around Anglepoint. Probably you know that already. We are a global service organization focusing on software asset management. We have customers from all industries, different sizes. The smallest customer we have has a couple of hundred IT users, up to customers with more than 200,000 client devices, mobile devices as endpoints. So we are servicing those customers and provide support in regards to licensing, tooling, governance, up to managed services, where we bring all of our expertise as a bundled service and help customers to support them in their daily SAM operations by helping them to collect and review usage data, down to reviewing commercial information and creating effective license positions, helping in audit mitigation, what have you. So this is where we excel. We are SAM experts. Ron Brill, our CEO, for instance, is also the head of the working group at the International Standards Organization, who is responsible for the ISO standard for IT asset management 19770. I'm also part of that committee and help in the development of those standards. I think we have some of the brightest and most experienced experts from this field of licensing, people that worked at Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, IBM, and we just keep that knowledge alive. And yes, we have a strong network also with the software publishers in order to gain insights into what's coming. And what is coming for SAP, as I said, also in the title, is S4HANA, and we'll get to that in a second. Just hand it over to you, Moshe, just to give it a little bit of background on your company, and then we hit it.
Okay, fine. So Expandion basically is the technology enabler for Anglepoint's analysis of the licensing situation. And with the always changing landscape of licensing in SAP, our technology supplies, I think it supplies the most current facts and figures based on the recent updates from SAP. And as we know, things are changing all the time. This is the reason for this webinar. Expandion technology definitely goes deep into usage and authorization management, which is a unique thing. And these unique features enable us to match, the required authorization for each SAP user and to translate it to the best fit SAP license, which is definitely the goal of this analysis, to find the best fit SAP license. Last but not least, if I would say, Expandion shows the results in easy to follow reports and Excel sheets. So basically, you can definitely go further into those analysis. As you can see, the features. The main feature of SAP licenses that the system provides are full transparency of the client's current SAP license situation, and then it goes to optimization opportunities and risk analysis of indirect access and digital access that we will speak about later. Adding, of course, this is technology is not enough, meaning adding Anglepoint's consulting expertise to our technology enables customers to see and to get a clear picture of the current and future needs. I think that this can summarize this slide shortly.
Well, thank you very much, Moshe. So I think it's both competencies, us understanding the licensing and kind of how SAP deals with that, and the capabilities and functions coming from the tool to collect the required data to come to the right conclusions. I think that's what this is also all about, because when we say S4HANA, now we actually get into this, you should be really prepared for what is coming. So kind of really go with that idea, on your mark, get set, go. We will focus quite a bit on your mark and get set, and then you will hear the go at the end of the presentation. So just to give you a picture of what is going on currently, and we did this as part of the kind of the teaser also for that webinar, where we compared the way that SAP is trying to sell S4HANA as being that merchant from the hit movie Aladdin, where that, you know, you can imagine, or maybe you have been to one of those you know, markets in the eastern part of the world, where you have those souks, and you know, you have those merchants, and they are trying to sell you their products, and it's typically that they try to combine this with a story. And that merchant in the Aladdin movie actually, you know, is trying to tell that you know, lamp that is sitting there, that's exactly what you have been always looking for. You know, it contains that mystery, that story about Aladdin, about that boy that, you know, turned from a beggar into a prince. That's actually how SAP is trying to sell this. So they create a hype around this, like what HANA can do for businesses, and that everything gets better. And yes, there will be, you know, there will be always options on having a transition or conversion from existing contracts to S/4HANA contract. Plus, there will be support. So this is all coming with a whole lot of marketing material. And, you know, maybe you fall in love with that idea of having possession of that lamp, and then, you know, you have that lamp, and the question is, what happens when you rub it? So, you know, you may recall the genie in the movie Aladdin, which was quite a funny guy. And maybe you hope that when you rub that lamp, you get, you know, a couple of wishes that this genie will fulfill. And that would be, for instance, a very smooth transition to S/4HANA. Or, you know, make my life more simple. So I have so and so many named user license types, all those package licenses, those engines. You know, I mean, how can I keep control about this? We have self-declaration and system measured engines, etc. Then hopefully it will actually come at a lower price. So that would be absolutely awesome if things would get cheaper when I move to S/4HANA. Make my life easier also with flexibility, so that I can actually, you know, increase usage and can purchase additional licenses the way I can give them back if I don't need them. Plus, hopefully everything becomes less risky from a commercial perspective. Security, we don't want to touch that too much, but that may be a wish list that that companies have when they actually think about S/4HANA. And then they rub the lamp, and suddenly the genie appears. And that genie, you know, is looking at your wish list. And by the way, you typically get only 3 wishes. It's kind of the law of a genie. And then, you know, he looks at your wish list, and then he may change some of the things that you actually wished for, and it, you know, will replace that with something else. Like, you know, transition to S/4HANA is probably a bumpy ride. It's at least the experience for many companies that made that transition, not just from a commercial point of view, but from a technical point of view. Simplification. Oh yeah, actually SAP did quite a few changes to the way that they actually license their software product or products. So that definitely could be considered some benefit. Lower cost, just going back, now we're talking about higher costs. So there is, you know, by definition, also by the price lists available to us, you see that the prices will go up. S/4HANA, and that's also the explanation from SAP, will come with additional features and functionalities which are not available currently in the current release being used or available. Therefore, the prices have to reflect this. Standardization, oh, definitely. It you know, S/4HANA is making things, you know, it will level out. I mean, one thing that you can say, every third-party database that you have been using for SAP or with SAP, that will be replaced by S/4HANA, so, or by HANA. Less risk, you know, as I said, well, everyone will have an opinion about this, but, you know, with the development of the software product, things should get better also in this regard. But that's kind of what you will probably see if you really rub that lamp. So you better be prepared and get, you know, get on your mark, and, you know, also have some kind of a time plan from your current SAP environment to a migration to S/4HANA. So I think everyone has received that information that has been going on since last year, where SAP, you know, started talking about putting an end date to their mainstream maintenance, which is now 2025 for the current SAP Business Suite, which means after that, and my understanding for most organizations is that the ERP system has to be one system that is kept under maintenance or under support, which means companies that want to continue to use SAP have to update, have to migrate to S/4HANA. So you should really get everything in place, because considering that implementation may take 2 to 3 years, and that probably ends up then in 2022 latest, where you have to have a contract in place that actually reflects your demand for S4HANA. So you better start now, knowing your risk from a compliance perspective, from a licensing perspective. Maybe you do some cleanup, which is also doable. I will get into the details there. So prepare, because there is an option to actually trade in unneeded licenses, shelfware, and put that as some kind of a conversion credit into a S4HANA deal. Predict your cost. The license models will change here and there, and will definitely have an impact on your license costs. So you should know that, be aware of that, and talk to the business and make them aware of this, so that they plan for the budget required. And last but not least, negotiate. So everything that you think you need has to be then put into a contract to actually fix all the terms and conditions that you need to have S4HANA implemented the right way. So just to give you some idea of what the differences look like between S4HANA and the current license model, or the legacy license model, as SAP calls it. Just to be clear, currently you have licenses that are combined between, it's a kind of a named user software engine license approach. By the way, those are kind of little snippets from an SAP presentation. So I'm just giving them room here to tell you what SAP wants customers to understand. So you are coming from a software engine and named user licensing. You have those well-known named user licenses called professional worker, logistics, employee, and so on and so forth. And probably, depending on the size of your organization, you have agreed to individual license types that reflect your actual business need. And then you have a couple of engines, something like SAP PO or GRC, what have you, that are either licensed based on revenue, calls, concurrent sessions spent. So sometimes even industry-specific solutions that are based on customers or other business-related metrics. That's how the current or classic or legacy license model for SAP looks like. And unless you have already signed up for an S4HANA contract, that's the contract you currently have. Now with S4HANA, that will definitely change. So first of all, even though there are licenses that SAP considers being related to users, they actually see everything now being a KPI-based licensing, which is also applicable to users. So they don't talk about named user licenses, they talk about use licenses, which is, at least to their understanding, a little bit different. Well, they definitely have different licensing options, from perpetual to subscription, also to consumption. S4HANA, as you know, will have some components also in the cloud. Think about solutions like Enable Now and other solutions from SAP that are connected to S4HANA. And last but not least, that's one of the changes that I already mentioned. There will be no third-party database solutions. So if you have something like a software application value for Oracle, IBM DB2, that will go away. Everything will be based on so-called HSAV, HANA Software Application Value, which reflects then the use of HANA as the database backend for your overall SAP environment. That's the most important change that you need to be aware of. But that also brings the question of how to prepare for that switch, especially around named users. What does this imply? So what would actually be what would the transition look like? And just to give you the two options that are currently made available from SAP. So you have one option which is called so-called product conversion, which means you have a certain product that you already want to convert. Let's think about a certain module from SAP that you want to switch to S4HANA, not your overall SAP environment, but you have a phased approach and you do the step by step. That could be an option. So you would convert the product. Well, yes, SAP would support this if that product has a valid conversion path. So there is actually an equivalent with S4HANA product line. Also, you would be definitely entitled to get 100% credit up of the net payable of the new S4HANA product. So this actually holds true for most of the licenses. So you have a legacy license agreement. SAP will not request you to just repurchase all the licenses. There will always be something like 100% credit in the conversion of your existing licenses to something that is S4HANA compatible or is then S4HANA. Well, besides that product conversion, SAP is pushing very hard to convince customers to actually do something they call contract conversion, which means you just take your overall contract and switch it to HANA. So everything will be swapped to HANA, and this is actually something that is also interesting for customers, will allow you to reallocate shelfware and, as I said, will apply for so-called conversion credit. So you can throw in unused licenses. There is a limitation to this, so you won't get just like 100% for those licenses that you put on the table that you don't need anymore. But that's, for instance, something you should be prepared. Like, what's your current license value, your asset value, using calculations with depreciation, what have you, plus support, etc. That would be something you need to consider in the discussion or negotiation with SAP. But that's basically the two options that you have. But in order to know of what you actually need, especially about this one option here, the milkshake concept, you should really know of what you have so that you can make up your mind in regards to how can you convert it. So just to give you an example, the conversion could look like this. So you have, let's say, professional users, limited professional users, and developers. Most customers have like employees and worker users and other named user license types. And then you have those line of business or industry solutions and other packages that you use. And there are definitely some, or like for the majority of those legacy products, there is a conversion path or a transition path to S4. So you can see the professional user would switch to so-called enterprise management professional use. As I said, it's not the user anymore, it's now use. And the same applies then, don't have to touch my mouse. The same applies to something like limited, which may end up in productivity and functional. I will explain what that is in a minute, because there is quite a lot of risk associated to that user swap. And then you have something like incentives and commissions management for insurance, which basically exists as the same product, maybe with a volume tier here and there. But actually, for most of the products, there is a conversion option available. What you see here, there will be no credit, as I said, for classic database. So if you paid for Oracle, that investment is gone if it was part of your SAP license agreement. So whatever percentage you paid, 17%, 19% for the Oracle usage or IBM usage, that one is basically gone. You will not be credited for that. Now, when we talk about this conversion, and we already mentioned that there may be some problems or some challenges in the conversion itself, you should actually follow a couple of steps that we recommend, or questions you should ask yourself, which you could also consider being different steps. So question number one, what SAP license do I own today? You won't believe how many customers actually do not have enough transparency about their current effective license entitlements. Since SAP has this approach of setting up a software license agreement, which is then more or less continued based on order forms, and order forms come with, sometimes with some kind of a, credit note on licenses you traded in, adding new terms and conditions, but the trade-in was not 100% of the former agreement, and so on and so forth. So it's a super complex setup that we typically see with customers, since those contracts are like updated on an annual basis. So every year a new order form for additional requirements you have, and that adds up. Also, the question would be, how many SAP licenses do I need today? So what's your actual demand? And interestingly enough, most customers really rely on the SAP measurement results coming from the USMM and S law. As we will show in a minute, that is not necessarily always correct. Next question, can I optimize my current license consumption? Oh yeah, you are always allowed to do this. I mean, there are some terms and conditions you need to follow. You cannot just make a change that is not in accordance to the terms and conditions, to the definitions set out in the price and condition list when it comes to questions like what is an employee allowed to do, or what is a limited professional allowed to do. So there are definitely rules that need to be followed, but you can optimize in accordance to those terms and conditions. Last but not least, will not least, it's not even last, but will my license need change over time? I mean, thinking about a negotiation with SAP that you will have this year or next year, but you're planning for a rollout or roadmap that is 2 or 3 years long, you need to know of how this demand will change and how this will impact your license negotiation with SAP. And then, things like that, that you also should consider. And there are many more questions like, are there environments that cannot be migrated to S4HANA because of dependencies to other solutions? How long will the S4HANA transition take? Do I need some kind of a downgrade right for my, environments that I will keep the way I operate them today? What about my terms and conditions that were individually agreed to more or less reflect my current usage? How will that change if I get something that is more standardized? And last but not least, questions like, what is with HANA as the database solution? So can I run with runtime edition, or do I need enterprise? These are just a couple of questions. The first 4, we will go into the details. So just better practice approach. I mean, what SAP license do I own today? So look at your contracts. I think that's kind of obvious, and list all the licenses you have. That doesn't have to be the same number or the same licenses as you would get confirmed by SAP as part of their feedback, from your SAP measurement. SAP typically puts a line in every line of products that has been measured, also a number of licenses that they think you own. That doesn't have to be the right number. So check your contracts, make sure that you actually have all the licenses available, that you have that information for the discussion. Get an effective entitlement position in this regard. Next, and this is how we also use Expandion, is where we deploy that tool. We could talk about how easy it is to deploy. It's very, very easy. We use it as a service. That's why it has to be easy to deploy and use. But we use that actually to really analyze how SAP is used by our customers. So how many users are actually active? Do those users really need a certain type of license, or can that be replaced with something more appropriate based on assigned authorization roles, use of authorization objects in the authorization roles? And I think, Moshe, you can add like 2 or 3 more thoughts on that.
Yeah, if you want, I think that in most organizations, let's talk about real life, I think that in most organizations, the effect of our optimization is mainly focusing on the following, areas like eliminating expensive licenses, identifying, unused, underused, and duplicate user accounts, and identifying suspected indirect access and things like this and risk like this. Just as an example, in one organization, we discovered that 10% of the users were not using the system as they were expected by the granted authorizations. And therefore, this is very, very common. And therefore, they managed to reduce those users' licenses from professional to employee, and save, let's say, significantly. In another global organization, the system identified, and this is going for indirect access, which is very popular now. Identified that at least 30 different applications were accessing SAP indirectly without any supervision, and it created, of course, a massive security risk and also a huge licensing demand for indirect access. And just by classifying, or just by identifying them and classifying them correctly, the access for each application and according to the usage of how it uses SAP, we managed to reduce the risk to a decent level that the organization understood. So I think that those examples give some ideas about what we are really doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moshe. So just to give you an idea, since we are working with that tool, and I can, I have the same experience, but I can add to this. It's quite interesting, especially it's more or less a kind of an eye opener. We typically sit then with, the SAP base admin, or even with the head of IT, and then we show them that, they have, let's say, on one SAP system, 500 authorization roles. Only like really 50% of those are actually allocated. The other ones are just there, unused. And the ones that are heavily used in regards to assignment, like we have, let's say 1,000 users that have this authorization role, we can then show them that, let's say, only 50% of those users make use of those different authorization objects, like actually start a certain transaction code, or actually make use of either just reading or adding information. And then we just give them the ideas, like, if you would reduce that authorization role or limit it to these and these authorization objects, by doing so, you would actually be in full alignment with, as Moshe gave as an example, with the terms and conditions for an employee user, and that would drop the license need for, let's say, 250 users from professional to employee. That's where they actually really just have to gasp for air, and then they'll say, why didn't we do that in the first place? And it's a complex thing, and I speak from experience. And this cannot be done with Excel files. This cannot be done with those let's call it simple tools. You have to have something that helps you to really do some data crunching here. So I actually consider always Expandion being some kind of a BI support tool with massive logic, and even with some artificial intelligence added to that, that helps to analyze those complex data sets. But this is what we can do. So at the end of the day, we actually have with our customers an optimized effective license position, which really means we will flag users as being up for a change for the assigned license type, which then also is being pushed back to SAP system. So we change the authorization roles, together with the user admins from the SAP team, together with them, and have also a track record, which then is enables them to also prove to their financial auditors. I mean, we are talking about an ERP system here, so everything is done audit proof. Last but not least, you need to know of where you're going to. Like, if you consider that there will be certain products rolled out, especially around S4HANA, and this is what we're talking about, you should know what comes first and which systems may be delayed in the migration. And maybe also you're planning for some kind of organizational changes, even a divestment, or maybe a merger here and there, which you should reflect in your S4HANA contract. I mean, think about it. If you sign up for a contract today, that contract probably will be good without any major changes for the next 2 or 3 years. So you should try to anticipate of, not just the technical side of things, but also from your organization. How will there be changes to your product or service offering? Will there be a change to your customer base? All of that should be taken into consideration if you plan for the demand that needs to be negotiated with SAP. Just why I'm saying this, if you are planning for a conversion right now, and we said that this kind of you get 100% discount, but every additional license you need in the future will have a different price. So just to give you an idea what the price difference looks like, so those are the current prices. The colors are actually then trying to connect the dots with this new use model from SAP. So you know about those standard prices. I hope you're aware of them, taken from the current price list in Europe. If you look at the same price list, which is then reflecting the prices for S4HANA, you see a slight difference. For instance, the professional use now is 3,500 euros instead of 3,200 euros. And all of that's kind of bluish will turn into something called functional use. I will get into details in the next slide, but that comes at 1,200 euros. And what's kind of the killer here, at least from a price increase perspective? Think about, you have an employee self-service user right now, 125 euros. That would be a so-called user for enterprise management for productivity use, which will cost 300 euros. So that is like, that's like double the price and more than that. So there is definitely a huge price gap for that additional demand that you may have. And if you don't negotiate it right, and maybe you even buy licenses now to include them into your legacy contract so that you get the conversion into S4HANA as 100% credit, maybe a consideration you should take. Next explanation that I was already telling about, like, what is this here? The professional use and functional use and productivity use. Just to explain that, you have professional use. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. So your professional users will probably end up in the professional use. But think about, if you have limited professional users, some customers have been requested by SAP to get a kind of a detailed explanation of what that limitation looks like into your agreements. Some customers stayed at this I would rather say vague or unclear definition from limited, where it just said there must be a limitation. So those unspecified limited users, to my understanding, would also fall into this professional use, but that has to be negotiated with SAP. SAP would tell you that only the professional users would end up in that bucket, and that limited professional rather end up in here, in the functional use. And for the limited professional users where you did that clarification, for instance, that is a user that would work, for instance, in marketing, or would work in sales, or in a certain, in a certain region, and would only use the following T codes, and is only using the following modules, or whatever. That more or less makes it, or creates that relationship to this functional use. So there's a certain function that has to be taken care of by that user, and limited kind of falls into this. But still, I would try to get all the limited professional users into the professional use bucket. Other functional use licenses, like project user, manager, self-service, that should end up here, no question asked. And then you have, for instance, employee self-service users that would end up in the productivity use. Well, just to give you an example of how crazy that can get, SAP actually told one of our customers that they would not give them a conversion credit for the employee self-service. Yeah, by the way, they would have been getting a credit with this milkshake approach, like unused licenses. So you don't need those productivity use licenses for self-service. Why not just buy that document type time management? And we had a webinar beginning of this year on digital access. And yes, that's a concept that will also be kind of really the cornerstone for S4HANA. So everything, as I said, is about KPIs. It's about outcome-based licensing. And this is all about digital access and the solution that SAP brought to the table for indirect access. And that customer, has been told by SAP, don't make the conversion for employee self-service, just buy the time management licenses, or time management licenses for documents. So the problem is, though, just if you would do a comparison, I can tell you that the price would increase tremendously. If you want to, I could provide you after the webinar with a rough calculation, but just think employee self-service, you may get this as a discounted price for something around 30 to 40 euros or dollars. That's kind of the same thing. And the document license comes at 50 US dollars cents, same price, for one document. And then there are volume tiers. Don't want to get too much into the details, don't have time. But just think about it. Every clock in, check out of that employee on a daily basis creates one document. So, without any discounts, for one day, you would pay €1 just for that one employee, If that employee works for 250 days per year, that alone would imply license costs on the digital access of $250 or euros. That's quite a jump, comparing it to, let's say, 30 to 40 euros or dollars that you have agreed on your named user licensing. But that's how SAP sells it. Like, well, you don't have to care about this because it's an indirect access issue anyway, because you use Kaba Benzing or some other solution around time recording that is a third-party application. So we can solve all this, and that's the argument from SAP, by switching it to digital access. So, but this is how that user conversion would look like. And there is also the risk that actually you will end up in more or less professional use only, since SAP announced, and that's also kind of a rumor that goes around the community, that they will switch their measurement approach from, well, the customer has done an assignment, like you assigned a 52 in AX or whatever license type to a user, and now that will change, so they don't take this assignment for granted. They would actually really measure based on authorizations. And that's why we, as a company, together with Expandion, really try to push that concept of cleaning up those authorization roles, really have a clean state, so that if that actually comes true and SAP would force that authorized or based measurement, that customers don't end up just because of very extensive authorizations that are at the end not being used, but that they would therefore end up in professional use just because of this. So be aware, clean up, so that this is not happening, that you have this idea where it's an easy fix to go to productivity use, but then you end up in the next measurement where SAP would tell you, based on the authorizations, that's actually professional use. Important point. So permission-based measurement, as we said. So have a closer look. And again, this is something taking as a screenshot. Moshe already explained of how the tool can support. And just that you can see here, that's one employee. I mean, we kind of, make it very pseudonymized here, but you can see, for instance, those are the different roles that are assigned to that specific user. And then we can see what has actually being used by that user. And yes, for instance, that's a customer where we made a recommendation to assign a license type to an authorization role so that it becomes also very clear for the SAP system in the measurement that, for instance, that's just some kind of special module type user, or this is an employee user, what have you. And then we can even see how often some of those, authorization objects have been used. That's exactly the power of the tool. So where we can have that view on those different users and help to actually optimize and then assign the most appropriate license type in accordance to those authorizations. So it's all about, you could say, if you want to get a good deal with SAP, it's all about cleanup, really cleanup. So the measurement of your SAP systems to identify, for instance, SAP user accounts. Next, deactivate users that are not active, or check especially around those suspicious service user accounts. Moshe mentioned the capability of the tool to identify indirect access. And we can talk about this also in the Q&A session if there's time. Then identify and review authorization roles, including authorization objects. Oh, there's a T missing, sorry. For optimize the authorization roles. So I always call this reduce to the max. And then we always recommend to assign a license type to those authorization roles, which makes it also transparent in the measurement with SAP what your rationale was behind this. And last but not least, consolidate your user accounts for SAP named users. And then derive your license demand based on that. So that's kind of the cleanup that we recommend. When we look at current license audits that happen here and there with customers that we work with, SAP is trying to target customers on, let's say, things that have not been cleaned up because of those 5 points that we give here. So, what's about those actual user accounts? Like, do you consolidate them right? They would still measure inactive users in regards to what's the actual active to date. We have seen customers that kind of keep users alive and only give them just kind of an administrative block, which doesn't allow them to log in, but there is no active to date that is set to the past. So those user accounts would still be counted. And authorization roles, which is always a nice discussion with SAP, since, if you would ask me, is there a clear legal explanation to which authorization objects relates to which license type? No, there isn't, but we have a list of settings where we had, discussions with SAP that went well, and SAP accepted that. So we could consider this as being kind of a legal justification of our configurations. But anyway, so, and last but not least, those crazy service accounts, which SAP typically traces to indirect access to, force customers into S4HANA with this digital access. So here it comes, digital access. So as I said, it's kind of refresh of what we have explained in our last webinar in SAP Digital Access. You're invited to stream that as well. It's available on our website. But just consider that, I gave this example already. Now you'll have it here again. So 500 check-in, check-outs per year per employee. And the 500 check-in, check-out, it always creates a database table entry. And for that, SAP would count one document. So, coming in, that timestamp, 8 o'clock in the morning, you come in, that's a document. Then you actually leave the company building, you check out, it's another document. 500 documents per year, 250 euros. And you probably got that at a super good price. By the way, SAP is selling this right now, those documents for a very reasonable discount. I have seen customers receiving discounts, I would say, way beyond the 50%. Where SAP, is trying to help them to switch to that outcome-based licensing. They also have kind of an adoption program around digital access, which is by in all fairness, that's kind of the initial step to S4HANA, because as I said, outcome-based licensing is the core principle of S4HANA. So last but not least, what should you do? So first of all, put your house in order, clean up and optimize your SAP environment. Next step, know your current and future license demand, especially things you don't need, milkshake principle, just keep that wording in mind. And then that would be something like a conversion credit for unneeded licenses. Next step, fight for high discounts and lock them. Lock them. When I say lock, try to get them for at least like 3 years, if possible for 5. So repurchase options. So you get 100% discount for the swapping of the licenses, but what about repurchases? Could you kind of save your current discount rates or price hold that you have in your current agreements? Things like that. Next one, try to keep legacy use rights where needed. Think about, you will have a roadmap, so you just don't change to S/4HANA overnight. So there will be a license need for S/4HANA before you start, so that you can start because you need the licenses before you go. But that, then it will take time. So if you switch a system, but you need to keep those legacy license terms, make sure that this is done by wording in your contract. Next step, agree on a system measurement pause as long as possible. Things will, move around with S/4HANA, like the way you implemented SAP in the first place. So try to get some wording that you have a layoff of this measurement, that you don't have to do this annual measurement, and, agree on something like the next measurement will be due in 2023 when S/4HANA will be implemented. And yes, you will share the roadmap with SAP so that they are aware of the ramp up in your organization with SAP S/4HANA. And last but not least, consider commitment rather than selective purchase. That comes back to this option of converting your existing licenses on a product line approach or going full into a full contract conversion. Our current recommendation is to go full contract conversion with all of those things that you see here on that slide, which should give you the flexibility and, let's say, also the assurance regarding in regards to pricing changes, etc., in the near future. That's our recommendation, and yes, we definitely can help. So I know that this is, you're maybe drowning in those requirements around S/4HANA and implementation and other things that take your time, and yeah, we can definitely help. So we have several services. Just a real quick overview about that. So just to define a licensing roadmap or to do a digital access risk analysis. By the way, that's where we would actually start using Expandion. Named user baseline, definitely something where we use Expandion. And last but not least, and this has to be done with Expandion because of the complexity that's behind that, authorization role optimization. If you're interested in one of those services, just get back to us. There is a link at the end of the presentation where you can just click or you just go on our website and can contact me directly or our marketing team for further discussion. So thank you very much for the time. And now we have time for Q&A. So I'll hand it over to you. I'm not sure if there have been questions so far. Braden, hello.
Hi. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you for that fantastic presentation. Just want to really quick make mention of those announcements that I did at the beginning. We have this webinar is being recorded, and we will send it out to you through email so that you can stream it as needed. We'll also release a very short article on our website that'll cover the most important parts of this. But and then we have an upcoming VMware webinar next month, so look for that. And let's continue on to the Q&A. Yeah,
I mean, I have a question here that I got. So, but please, if there are further questions, just post them into the Q&A portion of the webinar. But just one thing that was on one of the slides, and probably that's why the question came up. What's the problem with HANA Runtime Edition? As I said, currently the way you license databases with SAP is with something called software application value. That's the way how SAP, at least to the database side, sells those third-party products like Oracle Enterprise Edition or IBM DB2. Now that will be replaced with HANA, as I said, but the software you get when you actually license then for S4HANA is not in the first place HANA Enterprise. You will license HANA Runtime Edition as this HSAV, HANA Software Application Value. That will be the Runtime Edition, which is good for everything that you need with SAP, but there are some limitations that we have seen where customers are actually getting frustrated since SAP more or less comes back. So customers sign up for the HANA agreement, implement then HANA, make the technological change, and like really 6 months later, SAP comes in and says, oh, well, the way you use HANA is not in accordance to the terms and conditions set out in our contracts, which, for instance, that was one situation with one of our customers. That customer was trying to develop so-called, let's call it custom views. That's something very specific. So if you want to try, if you're trying to get data out of HANA, out of the HANA database, there are, let's say, limited technologies that you can use to actually really create those custom views. That includes, for instance, HANA Studio, Web IDE. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but for instance, there was also an option, a couple of months ago that was still available, which was called scripted calculation. Just keep that in mind. It was scripted calculation views. It was SQL scripts. So that was actually not available anymore. And SAP told our customer to switch to Web EDI or HANA Studio and use table functions. But the problem was that actually table functions in accordance to SAP was now a feature from Web EDI and HANA Studio, which was not authorized, even though it's documented in the software use rights from SAP, that you were allowed to use to pull data from HANA. And that brought SAP up and requested that customer to license their overall HANA environment with HANA Enterprise Edition. I probably don't have to tell you what the price difference is. I mean, yes, you pay a certain percentage for the HANA software application value, 15%. But then we talk about HANA Enterprise, which is based on CPUs or core licenses, which come that was incorrect. Sorry, it's coming at a gigabyte, 64 gigabyte blocks, and you license based on your peak usage. Sorry, that was a misunderstanding right now. So you license HANA Enterprise based on this peak usage of memory available allocated to HANA. And that for that one customer actually turned out to be a couple of million euros just because of using unauthorized, let's say, features and functionalities to pull data from HANA. That's just one thing that you need to be aware of. So HANA, even though it looks quite interesting because it's lower than what you paid, for instance, for IBM DB2 in regards to software application value, but the way you want to connect them to the database may imply additional costs because of the requirement for HANA Enterprise. Okay, another question that I received, I think that goes to Moshe. How does your tool identify and measure indirect digital access?
Oh, that topic. Okay. So I think that Expandion, Expandion tool monitors different type of access to SAP, such as all these kind of remote functions, IDOCs, and business APIs. And following this analysis, we use a built-in classifier that we developed in order to uncover accesses that indeed need to be licensed based on SAP updated guidelines. Note that not all the accesses need to be licensed as indirect access or being paid for, at least. In regards to digital access, the first step is for the tool to identify whether it exists or not. And then if it does exist, License Auditor gives you the opportunity to drill down into the document level so the company can decide which documents are really relevant and can make a smart decision, how to handle this situation. But again, as I said before, this has to be escorted by a professional consultant that knows the in and outs of those processes. Because the raw data is not enough to take a decision. But this is how we deal with indirect and digital access.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I mean, just to add to this, we see that this is still kind of the most important finding in an SAP audit, where SAP then, gets in contact with the customer. As I said, there is this digital access adoption program right now going on with SAP, where SAP then says, well, we will not sue you or force you to buy things that you don't need because you actually used SAP indirect and, looking at our license terms and conditions agreed with you, you were actually supposed to buy named user licenses for that in the first place, like the discussions you saw around Diageo or AB InBev, in those news releases, over the last 2 years. So this is how they actually then also switched into the discussion around digital access. And as I said, this is kind of the door opener also for this switch to S4HANA. So digital access is definitely a main concern for many customers right now. And even though you get this perfect deal, I don't want to give you any indication, but as I said, it's typically significantly above the 50% discount that SAP is willing to offer to customers in regards to document licensing. But the question is, how many documents do you actually create? And that comes back to when we talk about this S4HANA roadmap or the license requirements, we would also use Expandion to actually look at to the current document consumption. So we have the capability to look of what you would be paying, if SAP would ask you to switch to the document license metric for digital access. So that's definitely, a hot topic right now. So we should look out for this. I look through all of the remaining things. I think we touched that. But there's also a question like how much money do we usually save with doing such a project? I think that question goes to Moshe and myself. So it's kind of a joint answer here. Let me give me my point of view, Moshe, first. So, I mean, the thing is, if you're not prepared, you're probably ending up in a deal which will cost you more over the next years than what you probably need to, let's call it like little investment in either having an internal project or getting external support for this. But I can tell you, and I'm being absolutely honest about this, I have only seen one customer, and I'm speaking about a customer base of 100 plus, that actually was able to reduce their license costs with SAP. But they had such a bad agreement with SAP that they basically terminated it and negotiated a fully new agreement. And that led to discounts that were much better than the initially signed up agreement. And that was the only occasion where a customer actually saved money after a negotiation, like really paid less on an annual basis, looking at support or license purchases. Everything else that you can do is more or less about preventing unneeded spend. So get your cost growth in regards to SAP under control. So don't let that cost grow without control. So and look at the price difference that we showed you from the different named user license types to the new license concept for users with S4HANA. So there is definitely some risk associated with that, since every customer has to plan with IT budget, etc. So I would say, yes, we can help customers to prevent unneeded spend. That's my take on this. What's your take on this, Moshe?
I think that the savings is definitely very individual, and also attached to the company situation. For example, if a company is going through a layoffs, so the savings are different than when a company is upgrading from, for example, ECC to S4HANA. The numbers, may be the same, but the final savings can be significantly different. And again, as you said, very, very in a smart way, this is a game of understanding what you have and how to negotiate better and things like this, much more. And how to be, how to defend your current situation much more than just the saving issue. Although the savings sometimes exist, so this is our experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Looking at the time we have, it's almost 4, at least here in Germany. I hand it over back to you, Braden.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jan and Masha, for that fantastic presentation. A huge thank you to all who attended today. We appreciate you being here. If you have any further questions or would like to connect with one of our experts, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@anglepoint.com, on our website, anglepoint.com, or you can contact Jan or Masha directly. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.